Hey everybody, it's Mr. Forgione back with a lesson today on tariffs and how tariffs sort of work in the real world. Hopefully you guys are doing okay. If you have any questions or comments on any of the stuff I've been talking about with free trade or protectionism, hit me up either in the comments or on Google Classroom. We're going to have a writing assignment here coming up pretty soon. But I want to first talk a little bit about tariffs and again, just how these work. So I want to start off, basically we're going to have 3 points of comparison. We're going to look at an isolationist nation, and then we're going to look at a free trade nation, and then we're going to look at a protectionist country. But we're going to look at all three of those on the same graph. So this first one here, this would be an isolationist country, okay? Let's say that this country they're not trading with anybody. They've got a domestic supply. They've got a domestic demand curve. This point at the center, this is going to be the total amount, the total quantity that they are buying and selling. This is our price over here. And I'm going to kind of put there a little subscript for each one for isolation there, okay? Now, let's say that this nation has realized, you know what, there's a lot of benefits that come from trading with other groups. So, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and trade with absolutely anybody. We'll trade completely with anybody that wants to trade with us. And so what we end up seeing is a supply curve that is now going to essentially be horizontal, a world supply of whatever product it is. Let's say we're talking, I think last time we talked about cheese, let's talk about cheese again, okay? So let's say we've got a world supply of cheese. So this is supply in the world for cheese, okay? Let's say at the world level, because there's so many different buyers and sellers, that it's acting like a perfectly competitive firm, or a perfectly competitive market, I should say, that all of these are willing to sell at a certain lower world price here, okay? And that world price is going to be below the price of the isolationist country, okay? Now this FT is for free trade. This country is now engaging in trade with any other nation that wants it, okay? So the good thing we see here, oh man, prices are a lot lower, so this is good for consumers, and because of that, we take a look over here, and now there is a demand, and I'll put again demand FT under a free trade situation. There is a greater demand for these items than there was before, at least a greater quantity demanded, I should say, because now they're cheaper. That's the whole reason that the demand is greater, the quantity demanded is greater, is they're cheaper now. But because of that lesser price, look what happens to the supply, at least the domestic supply here of cheese. It's gone down considerably. So I'm going to put supply, domestic, free trade, okay? Now the reason I've added that extra on there is that we have a greater supply overall. We've got a perfectly elastic supply overall. However, in terms of domestic firms, let's say dairy farms or cheese producers here in the United States, that quantity supplied has gone down, and the reason being there's less profit to be made. There's a lesser price now, and so there's only so many firms that are willing to sell at that lower price. Now, the other thing that you've probably picked up on here is whenever the demand and supply are different like this, okay, whenever we're outside of equilibrium, we now have either a surplus or a shortage. So in this case, what do we have? I'll pause for a second like Dora the Explorer, give you guys an awkward second here. Do we have a surplus or a shortage? Okay, quantity demanded greater than quantity supplied, we've got a shortage. So how do we make up for that shortage? With foreign goods, or in other words, this shortage is made up for by imports. We are importing cheese now. We're bringing in brie. We're bringing in Swiss cheese that's actually from Switzerland. We're bringing in the fresh mozzarella. We're bringing in mortadella. Well, actually, that'd be more the lunch meat there if we're bringing in the mortadella. But we're bringing in all sorts of different aged cheeses and stuff like that from foreign countries here. All right, now, let's say that the dairy lobby is pretty tight. Let's say that they have a good lobby up in Wisconsin and Iowa, and that these farm nations, some of them are actually swing states. I say farm nations, farm states are actually swing states in terms of the election. And so they're able to successfully lobby, let's say, to put some protectionist policies in, and specifically a tariff. They're going to be able to put in a tariff. And so now, let me go with red here. Hopefully that stands out. So now what they're going to do is put a tariff that's going to be somewhere in between the original price and this free trade price, okay? So now what we have, we've got a world supply with a tariff. I'm going to put TAR there. So supply world with a tariff. So it's the same thing that we saw before, but now there's that extra tariff, there's that extra tax that's being placed upon the foreign countries, upon countries that are importing this good. And so what we see is, from the free trade perspective, if we compare this to free trade, we have a lesser demand, or a lesser quantity demanded. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to put T for tariff here. And for the supply, okay, for domestic supply, I put T, okay, for again, tariff. So what we see is, in comparison to the free trade amount, there's a lesser quantity demanded, but a greater quantity supplied. However, if we compare it to the original isolationist perspective, that isolationist situation, we still have less supply and greater demand. Now, there's still a shortage that's still going to be made up for by imports, but it's made up by fewer imports, or less imports than what we had down here in the free trade situation. So depending on your perspective on this, you could really use this type of graph as an argument either for free trade or for protectionism. If you're in favor of protectionism, you go, hey, look, we're bringing in far fewer imports than we did before, but we're making some money with the tariffs, so we're still bringing in some government revenue by doing the tariffs, and we keep more suppliers in business here. If you're in favor of free trade, you look at this and go, okay, by having free trade, we basically increase the quantity demanded, even above that of allowing trade, but with a tariff, we increase that quantity demanded. Yeah, we get rid of some domestic producers, but for all of these companies that are coming into the U.S., all of these companies that are based in, say, Italy or Belgium or wherever, that are selling their cheese now in the U.S., yeah, we may not be getting all of their profits, but what we do get is all those jobs in the supply chain, those jobs in contracts, in law, in marketing, in advertising, in sales, in retail, all of those jobs that may be not necessarily in pure management with the company, but are still white-collar jobs. We get so many more of those jobs now because look how much greater demand there is than both when we were in isolation and even above that when we have a tariff. So depending on your perspective, you can look at this from either way. Hope you guys are doing well. That's going to wrap up for today. The next time I do a video, which probably won't be for about a week, because I want to give you time on the writing assignment, we're going to be getting into exchange rates. It's a little bit more complicated, but exchange rates and accounting, that's going to be the very last two things that we get to before we get to a little bit more fun stuff with personal finance. Again, hope you all are doing well. I miss you guys. We'll see you soon.